even a little NFL on NFL Worship Day. We're going to talk a little bit about the NFL's FBI contingent. They have a whole department dedicated to covering up scandals. Does it surprise you that these people also work with the federal government to get you on Obamacare and take away your guns? Doesn't surprise me. Well, we might get into some chemtrail news. There was an interesting article that came out in CBS. It was on Drudge Report about a mysterious streak of light in the Bay Area that morning. People were talking about it, and it reminded me of an article we posted on Friday. And we'll get to that all coming up in the next hour. Paul, we've got some interesting stuff going on with ISIS. A few days ago, the entire ISIS opposition was blown up in an explosion. How convenient. They were all sent to Mustafar, and Anakin Skywalker came in with a lightsaber and just started slicing and dicing, and then I guess blew up the station. I mean, at least that's how it happened in Star Wars Episode 3. What do you make of that? The entire leadership is just decimated with a bomb. We got the footage running right now, if you're watching on Prison Planet TV, of Anakin about to take care of the guys who were supposed to be on his side. Yeah. There he is, taking care of him. Paul, what do you make of all this?
I mean, that was a really bizarre story. I know these rebel groups like to blow each other up on a regular basis now. There's a lot of infighting, but it was quite bizarre that this mystery explosion just wiped out all of them. There's also a really interesting article on ISIS called Path to War, Then and Now Haunt Obama, which is a New York Times article, the top of Drudge at the moment. And there are several interesting quotes, including about these beheading videos, which we can move on to a little bit later. But in terms of ISIS and the strike on Syria, which we saw introduced last week in Obama's speech, or earlier this week, it's now come to light that before he gave that speech on Wednesday night, Obama met with basically the CFR and Zbigniew Brzezinski. Now, remember, Hillary Clinton admitted that the CFR was located just down the street from the State Department because it gives the State Department its orders. It runs U.S. foreign policy. So hours before Obama gave this big speech on ISIS and how he's planning to conduct airstrikes in Syria, which, of course, he failed to do last year, he's meeting with the CFR. And he's also meeting with groups of columnists and magazine writers for a, quote, discussion. Hours before he gives this major speech, he's meeting with all these editorial writers, media heads from the New York Times, Washington Post. And it's obviously to massage the message on ISIS. We saw this with Bush numerous times before he gave major foreign policy speeches. He would meet with the New York Times and the Washington Post hours beforehand to basically instruct them on how to craft the narrative, craft what he's trying to push, the propaganda he's trying to manifest and project onto the American people. And that's state media. I mean, it's a glaring example of how they basically get their marching orders to create the narrative that the White House wants, and then they put it out immediately after Obama's speech.
And Paul, we did not get invited to this press conference. So that's how I can tell you it's state-run media, because not all the media were asked to come to this. I can tell you that right now. InfoWars was not asked to come and give and sit and take notes and be given fact sheets of the talking points. I'm going to go back to something back in right before September 11th. Remember, they killed the commander of the Northern Alliance with a bomb. They had some guys that were going to come interview him, and they killed him right before 9/11 happened and all this invasion. So maybe this is a precursor to another invasion of Syria. Maybe that's what this means. You know, they go in and kill these supposed opposition leaders to bring in a whole new crop of people that we don't know anything about. I didn't know much about these Syrian opposition guys anyway, but now we have a whole new crop of people we know nothing about. Who could be involved in that, and who could pull something off like that? What kind of an operation? Makes you wonder.
Well, I mean, they're arming the Syrian opposition who are openly defecting and giving weapons to ISIS. I mean, I documented that last week in an article. So the announcement for Obama to send all this aid and weapons to these Syrian rebels was basically fighting ISIS by arming ISIS, because now, as I documented in that article, they're defecting to ISIS, giving them weapons. In fact, the beheaded journalist Steven Sotloff was sold to ISIS by the so-called moderate rebels. So now we're backing the allies of ISIS, as the US's allies in the region, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, and Jordan, funded, bankrolled, trained ISIS militants in the first place. But going back to this New York Times article, a quote, Obama contemplated the possibility that Mr. Assad might order his forces to fire at American planes entering Syrian airspace. If he dared to do that, if he dared to defend his own country, quote, Mr. Obama said he would order American forces to wipe out Syria's air defense system, which he noted would be easier than striking ISIS because its locations are better known. He went on to say that such an action by Mr. Assad would lead to his overthrow. So Obama is now saying in private, and this has been leaked since, that if Syria dares to defend its own sovereign airspace against American bombardment under the justification of targeting ISIS, that basically Obama will launch a full-scale war on Syria. So it reminds us of the plot back just before the Iraq invasion, where they planned to fly a U-2 spy plane over Iraq painted in UN colors and try to provoke Saddam Hussein into ordering it being shot down to create the pretext for a justified attack. So now we're seeing exactly the same script being repeated in Syria.
Yeah, I think Dick Cheney came up with that plan with the U-2 spy plane. I mean, these people will not stop. They have to have their clone droid armies fighting against each other, and we have to pay for it. And this is just, it's the same story over and over again. 10 years later, we're still at the same spot. We're about to go to war with an enemy that we cannot beat, that has no base of operations, that can strike us at any time. And there might even be reports of these guys coming over the border. We don't know. We just don't know what is going to happen. And they've got it. They're arming these guys. They've got it so well orchestrated. And now we have senators like Patrick Leahy coming out and saying, if we go against NSA, well, if we curb the NSA, it could help ISIS. That's from The Hill that just came out. I mean, they won't stop. We have to just keep ramping up and taking away your rights, which last week, a guy we've had on this show, and I agree with a lot of what he says, Nigel Farage, one of your fellow countrymen, came out and said we have to give up liberty for security. And we have that video clip, and you guys roll that.
I tried 10 years ago to stop this from happening, and I was shouted down. But what we can do is to make sure that it doesn't get worse. And I'm afraid within our own states, we're going to have to be very, very vigilant indeed. And that probably means, and I'm sad to say this, but it probably means giving up some of the liberties that previously we've enjoyed.
I'm Darren McBreen, and these are some of the new items that are available now at InfoWarsShop.com.
Alert the public to Obama's blatant abuse of power with the new Obama t-shirt. Obama's Joker face on the front and come and take it on the back. It's time to publicly call him out for what he is, a tyrant. Defend the Second Amendment with our top seller Come and Take It t-shirts. And look at that, women's cut tank tops and t-shirts now available. Nice hat. Plus the Don't Tread on Me flag. And now you can become a micro distributor of the InfoWars magazine. Plus, get your own copy delivered right to your door each and every month. And if you're tired like I am of you and your family being exposed to polluted drinking water, get the Pro One high-performance water filter. It gets rid of all pathogenic bacteria, cyst, fluoride, heavy metals, and numerous other contaminants.
So join the revolution at InfoWarsShop.com.
And the military response, that was one thing we didn't cover. The DOD is going to be tasked. They're making that their #1 priority. I've got Paul Joseph Watson with me writing Shotgun. I'm actually looking for that article right now. It was a Fox News article that we had. And we're going to finish up on ISIS. We got a 5-minute segment here, and then we're going to come back from this break. I promise we're going to go right to Bowser in Missouri. We got Jim and Callie, Roy in Montana, Jim in Tennessee, and Rashid in Philadelphia. You guys are all very concerned about Ebola, and that's good. This is something we should be concerned about, especially now that we're importing it into our country. The State Department's getting over 160,000 hazmat uniforms. That's the State Department, not even the CDC. I mean, what does this all mean? This is crazy. Paul, let's get back to ISIS. Let's finish up on this. We've got senators. We just finished up with that clip from Nigel Farage talking about how we have to, he's channeling Bizarro Ben Franklin. We have to give up our liberties for security. We have to give up our liberties for security. I mean, and this is coming from everywhere. Even the Huffington Post is saying we got to raise taxes and bring back the draft to fight ISIS. I mean, this is a group we funded. Why don't we just cut their funding?
Well, Well, the potency of this propaganda is seemingly so intense that it's fooled people on both the left and right that you would normally assume would be guarded against this kind of militaristic, bellicose, talking point. Because, I mean, with Farage, the NSA bulk collection of data from telephone calls did not foil a single terrorist plot. I mean, that's documented. There's a Washington blog article about that, which goes through the justifications and then the debunking that it never stopped a single terrorist plot. So it's a false paradigm in the first place. I think Farage's logic is absent the fact that many of the terror plots in the United States and indeed in Britain, where most of the radical Islamic preachers are actually, MI5 informants, if you actually dig into it. Same in the United States with the FBI being behind most domestic terror plots. They create the patsies, they provide them with the fake explosives in the first place, they radicalize all the members of the terrorist cells. His argument is absent that foundational logic, which is important.
They find people of dubious mental clarity. I mean, most of these guys have very low IQs. There was one case where it was a group of guys in a house in, I think it was Ohio, and they were going to blow up a bridge. And the landlord was the guy who was the informant. And he was getting these guys riled up every day. And then like, hey, I got the bomb. Let's go do it. I mean, it's insanity what the FBI does now. And this is just to keep their budgets going. This is just to keep the war on terror going. It's like why they ship drugs into this country. To keep the war on drugs going, we got to ship in the drugs and feed them to people.
It's insane. I mean, even the New York Times, there was quite a famous article a couple of years ago where it was something like FBI plots created by terror plots created by the FBI, and basically every single major domestic terror plot has been a result of the FBI radicalizing these mentally disturbed patsies, providing them with the fake explosives, contriving the plot themselves. And I think Farage is playing off this idea that Cameron and Obama have been, quote, weak on ISIS. But again, it's absent the knowledge that the US trained many ISIS militants in Jordan in 2012. Of course, many Syrian rebels backed by the UK and the US defected to ISIS, became part of the radicalized group. So they're trying, as UKIP becomes more closer to the mainstream, as they try to accrue more power, they're taking on more establishment talking points, which is concerning. I mean, I voted for them in the recent European elections because they offered a genuine alternative. But any so-called self-proclaimed libertarian that says we need to give up our freedom for security needs to take a serious look in the mirror, because we're told that the terrorists hate us for our freedom, yet we're going to willingly give it up to in the name of fighting terrorism, which in the main is created by our own governments.
That's the great paradox that we live in now, because of the terrorists that we arm and that we give training to, and missiles in Benghazi. And now we give them airliners. Strap yourselves in. We're going to be going to calls. Top this next break coming up in 1 minute. Bowser, you're up. But Paul Watson, you wanted to talk about the beheading, the latest ISIS beheading. What is your take on this third round of high-quality beheadings that we're now seeing from ISIS?
Well, it's interesting, Rob, because in that New York Times article I mentioned earlier, there was a quote which was, Obama noted that gruesome videos released by ISIS had helped galvanize public support for action. And another quote, he added that ISIS had made a major strategic error by killing them, i.e. the hostages in the beheading videos, because the anger it generated resulted in the American public's quickly backing military action.
Wow.
So isn't that interesting?
Just like it was planned, Paul, and give them $50 million more. Or 50,
It's quite brazen that these videos, which apparently are ISIS propaganda videos, are only serving to enhance the US's case for military expansion in the Middle East. And again, we ask, is it insensitive to question war propaganda, given that it could result in the deaths of thousands of innocents if this campaign widens? And is it insensitive to question evidence cited as accurate by governments that have deliberately faked propaganda in an effort to justify military aggression? Just 3 weeks ago, NATO put out these satellite images which claimed Russian troop movements inside Ukraine. They turned out to be from a video game. So is it naive of us to question this kind of stuff? But again, with this third video, obviously it's a British hostage. Yeah. What's different from the first two is, I mean, you didn't even see a beheading in the first two. In this one, You don't even see them begin to cut his throat like in the last one, and you don't see a beheaded body. Now, this is ISIS. We know they've killed thousands of people brutally. There are YouTube videos all over the place of them killing women and children, beheading people. Why are they censoring their own brutality if that's their main agenda, to transmit how ruthless and brutal they are?
Exactly. We didn't care when they were destroying churches. We didn't care when they were killing Christians. We didn't care when they were lining up people into pits and shooting them with guns. We didn't care when they were lining up people and decapitating them one after another. There are all those videos that have been out there for months. We didn't care about that. We only cared when it was Americans and slickly produced, very slickly produced propaganda-type videos that ISIS started to release. And what are they doing? They're taunting the bear now? And now we're going to strike them? That's what they want? No, they want to take over. They want to create their own state, in theory. So why would they do this? Why would they put out videos to elicit that type of response from the United States? Who knows?
Celebrate the spirit of freedom and liberty upon which our nation was founded at InfoWarsShop.com. Molon Lave is ancient Greek for come and take it. This popular design combines both classic Greek Spartan imagery with modern M16 assault rifles. Now available in women's tees and proudly made in the USA. And now you can protect yourself from corrupt cops with the InfoWars dash cam. It's your car's black box that records all that the driver sees and hears. And introducing the Block It Pocket. It renders your phone undetectable while protecting your private data and your health. Or take back your privacy and protect your personal information by getting your very own Detractor cell phone pouch. So get incredibly high-quality, freedom-based products and help fund the revolution at InfoWarsShop.com.